Hello everyone, it's been a month and a half since the release of the pilot episode of The Amazing Digital Circus, and in that short period of time, a huge fandom has gathered around this animated series that can't wait for the sequel. I analyzed all the other shows that the Glitch team has been involved with, talked to people who have been working in animation for a long time and created various animated series, and compared the performance of The Amazing Digital Circus to other similar shows. I also watched the Glitch X 2023 conference to get a full understanding. And after all that, I can give you an approximate release date for the second season of our favorite digital circus. Now, before you watch the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like it, and leave a comment. And we begin with our amazing video. First of all, I would like to answer all those who are worried that the second series of Digital Circus will not be released. Calm down, it will definitely be released, because Gooseworx's statement that if the circus fandom is bad, they will intentionally make the project worse or even shut it down was a joke. And now let's look at the views of the pilot episodes of other shows. For example, the most popular before Circus was Hazbin Hotel, which in 4 years and a huge number of videos on YouTube with different theories, fan versions and more, managed to collect only 92 million views. That seems like a lot. Yes, it is, if you compare it to 99% of all YouTube videos. But if you look at the results of Amazing Digital Circus, which in just 1.5 months managed to get 153 million views, and that's without a huge fan base. To be honest, absolutely no one expected such a huge success, both regular YouTube viewers who have never seen the Glitch channel or their projects before, and loyal fans. And what to hide, the authors themselves admitted that they were not ready for this, because their last project, Murder Drones, for 2 years was able to collect only 31 million views. And also from the moment of appearance of the pilot episode of Murder Drones to the full-fledged second series was a little more than a year. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon to find a situation where the pilot episode of an indie animation has gained popularity, viewers are waiting for the sequel, and it simply disappears for a long time. Let's even compare Murder Drones and Helluva Boss. Despite the fact that the drones appeared a year later, the views of new episodes are still inferior to those of Helluva Boss. All because a year of waiting has completely destroyed the interest of most viewers. I think that Glitch and Gooseworx are aware of this, and are therefore unlikely to delay the release of a full episode. Now let's talk a little bit more about Amazing Digital Circus and Hazbin Hotel, because they are the most popular animated series that Glitch is involved with, and they have something else in common, as both projects only have a pilot episode so far. But don't worry, we won't have to wait more than 4 years for the release of the second series of Digital Circus, as they are in completely different environments at the moment. After all, Hazbin Hotel is currently under the control of A24 Studios, which is working with Amazon on the project, so it's not really an indie project anymore. The Digital Circus, on the other hand, is entirely under the control of indie studio Glitch and the same animator, Gooseworx. So there will be no delays due to external factors or pressure from big companies. I think you've realized that it's not really correct to take into account and try to understand when the next series will be compared to other projects, because in any case, it's all different animators. And secondly, as I said, the Digital Circus has gained a huge number of views, and so not to lose viewers in the interest of the creators to release the series as soon as possible. Now let's talk exclusively about Amazing Digital Circus. Financing such a large project costs a lot of money, but the Glitch team released their merch almost immediately after the pilot episode was released, and I'm sure they've already been able to recoup all the costs not only for the next series, but for the entire potential season. This means that the Glitch team and Gooseworx personally don't have to worry about funding, which theoretically means that the next episode will be presented to us much sooner, since many ambitious and really interesting indie projects often don't get continued due to a lack of funding. Also, I think many of you have noticed that even though only the pilot episode has been released, there is already a huge amount of fan animations on YouTube. This means that Amazing Digital Circus has already become so self-sufficient that its existence continues without any interference from the creators, which is actually very good for the animators, but bad for us. But bad is relative. At least this situation gives the creators the opportunity to make a new series with more quality and detail, which is good for us, but it may take much longer than planned. It could be a few months or 6 months, but so far we haven't gathered all the facts to understand when we should wait for the next series. Now let's talk about Glitch X 2023, because this is an official source, so we can definitely rely on this information. Besides various information about Murder Drones and other projects, a big part of the conference was dedicated to our favorite Amazing Digital Circus. During the conference, we were told what we said earlier, that the authors didn't expect such an unreal success of this project, so they didn't prepare much for the release of the first episode. But after such results, they started to work very quickly. But before the first season is released, they need to settle legal issues, set up the accounting, gather the team, and many other details that we as end users don't even know about. But one of the most important announcements was that, in the next few months, we will hear new information about the circus that I think will make us very excited, but more on that later. Also at this conference, Gooseworx told us about the inspiration behind Amazing Digital Circus and how Pomni was originally going to be a frog, but after the final script was approved, it was decided that they needed a circus character, and the final decision was to go with a jester character, which is what we see on our main character in the end result. Zooble was the very first character that Zooble drew, and by the way, Zooble is a reference to the Zolo constructor, the essence of which is that you can build a single construction out of completely different parts, and it can be quite strange and unusual. And also, Zooble will have screen time in the next episode, and episode 3 will be completely dedicated to this character. This means that at least the script for the next 2 episodes of Digital Circus is complete or almost complete, which also shortens the waiting time for the second episode of Amazing Digital Circus. Well, and from the interesting things, I would like to say that Jax loves spaghetti and Pomni is a fan of salmon. But I think all this was made up in a second, because it is unlikely that Gooseworx prepared for such questions. But theoretically, we could see some kind of reference to this in the next episode. Also, all the inhabitants of the Digital Circus don't feel physical pain. It's more of a negative mental state that gets worse every month they live in the circus. And the last thing I want to play with is Gangle's masks. She has 2 masks, one sad and one funny. And Gooseworx also confirmed that a funny mask is much easier to break than a sad one. And it's just like in our lives, because it's much harder to make us happy than it is to put us in a bad mood. But we're getting away from the main point of our video. Remember when I said that we were going to have some really big news about Digital Circus in the next few months? I saw on the internet that a lot of people thought that this news would be the release of the first full episode of Digital Circus. Unfortunately for you and me, that's not going to happen. But why is that? Because we're all really looking forward to it. So let's talk about the technical component of creating an episode of a serious and full-fledged project like Amazing Digital Circus. Remember that I said at the beginning that I contacted animators who work on serious animation projects. Consider all my further words as the words of people who are directly involved in the industry. To create such a large project where there is not a single artifact, so detailed every tiny detail that we do not notice much, but for the animator is of paramount importance. For example, the scene with Zooble and Jax. There were several animators involved in creating that moment, and then Gooseworx did the final cut of that moment. You should also be aware that creating a 20 or 30-minute episode of such a detailed show takes not 1 or 2 months of work, but at least 4 months, but no one can say the maximum. But it all depends on the budget and the number of people in the team. As I said, Glitch and Gooseworx are not stupid people, and they are ready to invest the maximum amount of money to get the same quality of animation in the shortest possible time. And it's never a good idea to rush the studio, because rushing has never resulted in a really high-quality project in our history. Well, the video optimization and dubbing itself takes a lot of time, because to translate the series into 12 languages and check everything for correctness takes several weeks, and subtitles can actually be done in a couple of days. As a result, we should not expect the continuation of the Digital Circus any sooner than 3 months from the start of the pilot episode. A month and a half has already passed, which means that the minimum term when we will be able to see the Digital Circus will be the middle of January. But for some reason, based on all the above, I am sure that we definitely do not have to wait a year. In late February or mid-March, we will definitely see the second series of our strange, incomprehensible, but at the same time insanely interesting Amazing Digital Circus. But not later. Because I repeat, the animation team are not stupid people and know how the popularity of different shows or series works. Write in the comments if you think there will be a new series of Digital Circus, and it's time for me to wish you success and good luck and say see you in new videos.